The question of whether or not there is a God or truth or reality or whatever you like to call it, can never be answered by books, by priests, philosophers or saviors. Nobody and nothing can answer the question but you yourself, and that is why you must know yourself. Immaturity lies only in total ignorance of self. The great Jewish scientists and philosophers of the last few generations, Spinoza, Einstein, Freud, Robert Oppenheimer and others, were natives of Europe and America. Almost all the noblest things that have been achieved in the world, have been achieved by poor men, poor scholars, poor professional men, poor artisans and artists, poor philosophers, poets, and men of genius. Pakistan is heir to an intellectual tradition of which the illustrious exponent was the poet and philosopher Mohammad Iqbal. He saw the future course for Islamic societies in a synthesis between adherence to the faith and adjustment to the modern age. If we mean to have heroes, statesmen and philosophers, we should have learned women. A philosopher who is not taking part in discussions is like a boxer who never goes into the ring. Only as an individual can man become a philosopher. Most mothers are instinctive philosophers. I do not know what the spirit of a philosopher could more wish to be than a good dancer. For the dance is his ideal, also his fine art, finally also the only kind of piety he knows, his divine service. The ancient Greek philosophers were blonde and blue-eyed and, even then, talked about how their race was mixed with others and how this affected their society negatively. When there were no more natural blondes and no more blue eyes in Greece, they incidentally stopped producing great philosophers. To be an Instagram model, you absolutely cannot just post pictures of yourself in a bikini for the sake of people seeing you in a bikini, even if that is exactly what you are doing. No, you need to caption these photos with an inspirational quote so that people will know that you are not just a butt, you're a gosh dang philosopher. All this is applicable to the intellectual faculties of man. There is a considerable difference between one person and another as regards these faculties, as is well known to philosophers. For conclusion, I say the philosopher teacheth, but he teacheth obscurely, so as the learned only can understand him, that is to say, he teacheth them that are already taught. What I really love about philosophers and psychologists is that they sound smart. No philosopher understands his predecessors until he has rethought their thought in his own contemporary terms. We are not to give credit to the many, who say that none ought to be educated but the free, but rather to the philosophers, who say that the well-educated alone are free. Don't feel embarrassed if you've never heard of William Lane Craig. He parades himself as a philosopher, but none of the professors of philosophy whom I consulted had heard his name either. Labor is the fabled magician's wand, the philosopher's stone, and the cap of good fortune. The philosopher has never killed any priests, whereas the priest has killed a great many philosophers. For my future I have no concern, and as a true philosopher, I never would have any, for I know not what it may be. As a Christian, on the other hand, faith must believe without discussion, and the stronger it is, the more it keeps silent. You philosophers are lucky men. You write on paper and paper is patient. Unfortunate empress that I am, I write on the susceptible skins of living beings. The man of science is a poor philosopher. There is nothing so strange and so unbelievable that it has not been said by one philosopher or another. All are lunatics, but he who can analyze his delusions is called a philosopher. I will admit, like Socrates and Aristotle and Plato and some other philosophers, that there are instances where the death penalty would seem appropriate. To a philosopher all news, as it is called, is gossip, and they who edit and read it are old women over their tea. Poets are the sense, philosophers the intelligence of humanity. God is the great mysterious motivator of what we call nature, and it has often been said by philosophers, that nature is the will of God, and I prefer to say that nature is the only body of God that we shall ever see. I have studied many philosophers and many cats. The wisdom of cats is infinitely superior. Dogs and philosophers do the greatest good and get the fewest rewards. God grant that not only the love of liberty but a thorough knowledge of the rights of man may pervade all the nations of the earth, so that a philosopher may set his foot anywhere on its surface and say, "This is my country." A process which led from the amoeba to man appeared to the philosophers to be obviously a progress, though whether the amoeba would agree with this opinion is not known. The basic drive behind real philosophy is curiosity about the world, not interest in the writings of philosophers. The best philosophers were not academics, but had another job, so their philosophy was not corrupted by careerism. Of what use is a philosopher who doesn't hurt anybody's feelings? Children, old crones, peasants, and dogs ramble, cats and philosophers stick to their point. A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, adored by little statesmen and philosophers and divines. If I became a philosopher, if I have so keenly sought this fame for which I'm still waiting, it's all been to seduce women basically. Teenagers are philosophers. They are thinking about the big things like existence and identity at a time when their identities are changing so fast. The hero of the Peanuts is Charlie Brown. I play the dog that sleeps on the top of his dog box who's a philosopher. I'm drawn to that. So I'm drawn to Barbassa as I'm drawn to Einstein, because they are outsiders, and I suppose, as a character actor, that's the turf that you're locked into, in a way. A philosopher once said, half of good philosophy is good grammar. Art is an invention of aesthetics, which in turn is an invention of philosophers. What we call art is a game. Individual science fiction stories may seem as trivial as ever to the blinder critics and philosophers of today, but the core of science fiction, its essence has become crucial to our salvation if we are to be saved at all. The philosopher proves that the philosopher exists. The poet merely enjoys existence. Even philosophers will praise war as ennobling mankind, forgetting the Greek who said, "War is bad in that it begets more evil than it kills." Be a philosopher but, amid all your philosophy be still a man. The impulse of the journalist is to be novel, yet to relate his curiosities to the urgencies of the moment. The philosopher seeks what he conceives to be true, regardless of the moment. To have no time for philosophy is to be a true philosopher. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. No man was ever yet a great poet, without being at the same time a profound philosopher. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.